is your Filipino radio experience in Las Vegas. PHLV Radio. PHLV Radio.
Are you ready to travel? We got all the travel buzz here on Smart People, Travel Wise with Alvin Adriano on PHLV Radio.
Hello, mabuhay, and thank you. It's a wonderful Tuesday here, and I would like to welcome you all back to Smart People Travel Wise. I'm your host, Alvin Adriano, CEO of Travel Wise International, and I would love to thank all of our viewers and listeners for spending a few minutes of your day here with us. I have a great show today, and with even an unbelievable guest who I'm so excited to bring out. But before I do, let me remind all of our viewers, if you're watching this live, please hashtag live. And if you're watching this on the replay, please hashtag replay. Let us know where you're watching from, because we really want to know where all of our fans are watching from. And you can always watch or view our show on Facebook and on YouTube. And you can also listen on the show on Amazon Fire, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and iHeartRadio. Oh, and even better, you can even download the app PHLV Radio, which is available on all iOS and Android devices. So Smart People Travel Wise is a new platform to educate the modern traveler with exciting new updates, inspiring destinations, and of course, all the possibilities to make your dream vacation reality. This is our very first episode, and today, as we are in the middle of Asian American Pacific Islander Month, which spans from May 1st to May 31st, this month is a celebration of Asians and Pacific Islanders in the United States. I am truly blessed to begin my show during this time to really recognize the challenges faced by Asian Americans, Pacific Islanders, and Native Hawaiians and their vital contributions to the American story. With that said, today's episode will really touch on the Filipino-American Alliance, which was established in 1946. U.S.-Philippine relations are based on strong historical and cultural linkages and a shared commitment to democracy and human rights. The alliance has assisted to foster broad-based economic growth, improving the health and education of Filipinos, and to promote peace and security, plus advancing democratic values, good governance, and strengthen regional and global partnerships. It's for this reason that the Philippine ambassador to the United States, Jose Manuel Romualdez, and the U.S. Acting Assistant Secretary of State for East Asian and Pacific Affairs Ambassador Sung Kim officially launched a bilateral campaign to celebrate the 75th anniversary of the establishment of diplomatic relations between the Philippines and the United States. This unbreakable friendship between Americans and Filipinos has led to multiple strategic partnerships and an equally strong economic relationships. There are more than 4 million U.S. citizens of Philippine ancestry in the United States and more than 350,000 U.S. citizens in the Philippines, which also includes a large number of United States veterans. An estimated 650,000 U.S. citizens visit the Philippines each year. And one more thing, Manila is home for the only Veterans Administration regional office outside the United States, and the American Cemetery in Manila is the largest American military cemetery outside the United States. The United States is one of the largest foreign investors in the Philippines and is the Philippines' third largest trading partner. And today, we have a special guest to help us discuss the significant alliance that has withstood the test of time. Consul General Elmer Gato from the Consulate in New York City. So here's a brief bio on the Congen Gato. He is a journalist turned diplomat who officially assumed as Consul General of the Republic of the Philippines in New York on March 30th, 2021. He's a career diplomat with the rank of Chief of Mission Class 2. Consul General succeeds Consul General Petrona Garcia, who retired in January, and before he became a Consulate General, was a journalist before joining the Foreign Service. He served in various capacities in the Philippines and abroad in the past 22 years. Prior to his assignment in New York, he has served as a Charge d'Affaires and head of mission of the Philippine Embassy in Tripoli from 2019 to 2021. His first overseas posting was at the Permanent Mission of the Philippines to the United Nations from 2003 to 2010, where he also served as a member of the Philippine delegation to the UN Security Council from 2004 to 2005. He was assigned to the Philippine Embassy in Washington, D.C., my hometown, from 2012 until he volunteered to go to Iraq, where he served as charge d'affaires and head of mission of the Embassy of the Philippines in Baghdad from 2015 to 2018. At the Home Office, he serves as Foreign Affairs Assistant Secretary for Public Diplomacy and later for Strategic Communications during the terms of Foreign Affairs Secretaries Alan Peter S. Cayetano and Theodora L. Locsin Jr. from 2018 to 2019. During the term of Foreign Affairs Secretary Albert F. Del Rosario, he was designated Special Assistant for Special Projects at the Office of Administration. He was Director of Intelligence of the Intelligence and Security Unit under the Office of Secretary and the Executive Director of the National Council on United Nations Peace Operations from 2010 to 2012. He served as a Special Assistant for Foreign Affairs Secretary Domingo L. Saison Jr. and Telofisto L. Gingona, spokesperson and officer in charge of the Presidential Commission of the Visiting Forces Agreement, and as officer in charge of the Regional Consular Office in San Fernando and Clark Field, Pampanga. Consul General Gato is a special recipient of the Gawad Mabini, one of the highest awards of the government of the Philippines, which is only bestowed on Filipino diplomats for initiating a public-private partnership that led to the transfer of consular offices to shopping malls across the country. He joined the Department of Foreign Affairs in 1998 after passing the Foreign Service Officers Examination of 1996. He also passed the Career Minister's Examination of 2013. And before joining the Foreign Service, Consul General Gato was a journalist for 17 years who started as a 16-year-old cub reporter. He was also an overseas worker in Jeddah and Jakarta. He is a dedicated Filipino who has served the Filipino people and community to the best of his abilities, an unbelievable leader who has influenced and empowered many of our Kababayans and has left an unsurmountable impression wherever he goes. So for all of our viewers, please smash those heart buttons and give him a well-deserved thank you for being here today with us. So let's welcome the Honorable Consulate General Elmer Gato. How are you, Pa?
Thank you, Alvin, for having me in your show. I understand it's the first time you're having it. Thank you to PHLV Radio also for allowing us to reach out to our Kababayan worldwide through your show, Smart People Travel Wise.
Oh, thank you so much. I really appreciate spending some of your time here. I know you're a very busy man, especially with everything going in New York, which is one of the busiest cities in the world. So thank you so much. But can you just tell us what's going on for you in the office today or anything spectacular?
Well, it's a busy post, all right. So I just came back from one breakfast meeting, and then I had 15 minutes to spend with some of our Kababayan from Pampanga who dropped by. They were former schoolmates who went to our school ahead of me. And then I had a lunch meeting with our tourism attaché, Sir Francisco Lardizabal, in one of the restaurants, the Filipino restaurants in Little Manila. And then we had to rush back from Queens just to make it in time for your program. And after your show, I would have a few hours to do paperwork. And then I have another virtual meeting with other Kababayans from New Jersey.
Oh my gosh, your schedule is jam-packed with so much into it. I really feel for how much work and dedication you have. I even mentioned in your resume and bio, and it's just a testament on your devotion to the Philippines. Could you share with all the viewers what motivates you, or and your inspiration to help our Kababayans wherever they are, especially now in New York?
Well, it's our Kababayan themselves. I have an activist background, so I was still in high school when I joined this fraternity that advocates for serving our people. It's paglingkuran ang sambayanan. So I've been guided by that since high school, and I became a journalist and later as a diplomat. As you know, we have more than 10 million Filipinos working overseas, either as overseas workers or immigrants. And here in New York, for instance, we have more than 300 Filipinos and Filipino Americans in New York State and the 9 other states under jurisdiction. So they are my main motivation. You know? Like our other Kababayan working overseas, our Kababayan here in the northeastern, what do you call this, coast of the United States, have played an instrumental role in how the Philippines transform economically. So we have to make sure that we're there to deliver vital consular services to them and assist those who are in distress. So the same is true in all other posts that I've served in, except the Philippine mission to the United Nations. I was in Washington, D.C., I was in Baghdad, and I was in Tripoli, where I really had closer engagement with our Kababayan and get to know their needs, their concerns, and come up with what we can do to serve them more effectively.
You mentioned about being activists, and I know journalism is very, very. Their goal is to be fair and just. And I really wanted to share a fact, or I just asked you a question, because May 3rd just passed, and that was World Press Freedom Day. And I remember reading a little snippet of what you were doing. You were out a long time ago with your journalist friends and protesting for what the actions were in, I think, in Clark Air Force Base. I think I read something like that. Could you share with our viewers what that was about and what led to World Press Freedom Day?
Well, that was just one of many adventures I had as a we should go back to the time that I became a journalist. That was 1983. That was the assassination of former Senator Benigno Aquino, which really changed the political landscape back home during that time. So I was really affected by the assassination. And since I was a student writer in high school, I thought I could contribute to efforts to restore freedom, justice, and democracy in the Philippines by writing about the truth, what's happening in the country back then. So I applied with Ang Pahayagang Malaya, which is a member of the alternative media back home during that time. So I was 16 when I went to the newspaper office to apply for one of the vacant positions that was available. And the publisher, Mr. Jose Joe Burgos, he's one of the press icons of the Philippines.
Yeah.
Was looking at me and said, "Are you sure you know what you're getting yourself into?" It's just a few weeks before that, his newspaper office was raided. He had two papers. It's called We Forum and Malaya. So We Forum was raided several weeks earlier. So he said, you remind me of my son. So how old are you again? So I was 16 at that time.
Oh, wow.
But of course, I wouldn't tell him. I said I was 18. So he was hesitant, but he took me in. So for quite some time, I was actively writing about human rights issues and other stories that I hope would make us realize that we need to work together to fight so we can restore the democracy we lost when martial law was declared in 1972. And so that's how it was. So, I got myself into trouble, during that time, our military was not as professional as it is now.
Yeah.
So I was placed in a military hit list. So it came to a point that I was given 2 weeks to leave Angeles City, where I was based. I'm from Angeles City, Pampanga, near Clark Air Base. So that's where I was reporting from. So I was told to leave within 2 weeks. Otherwise, I would end up as another figure in the extrajudicial killing list.
Uh-huh.
So I went to Manila. I joined the Philippine Daily Globe, and that newspaper was being published and edited by Chodoro Locsin Jr., who now happens to be my boss. He's the Secretary of Foreign Affairs now.
Yeah.
So that's how it was. So then I went to Saudi Arabia as a reporter, went back, rejoined the Daily Globe, and then it went on strike. And Secretary Locsin established what became Today newspaper, and I joined the publication as his national editor until I went to Jakarta to be the executive editor of another newspaper. And then I went back to join the Foreign Service.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, all of those stories that you read about and what actually became your evolution from journalist to diplomat. How did journalism really inspire and motivate you, or even change your perspective when you joined the Foreign Affairs?
I was in Saudi Arabia in 1992 to 1993. And as an overseas Filipino worker, I have been on the other side of the window. When you go to the consular section of an embassy or consulate, you're there as a client. So I've seen how it was to be there. And I realized that, there need to be changes in how government, especially our embassies and consulates, should be serving our people. And now that I'm on the other side, I'm inside. And I keep telling our colleagues, especially when I was in Washington, also in Baghdad, Tripoli, and even here, that we should try to put ourselves in the shoes of our clients and see how we would want to be served. So that's one aspect of it. And as an activist and journalist, I've engaged our people, common people, as some would call, like farmers, laborers, students, etc. So somehow I know how they feel, where they're coming from. So when I entered government, I want to make sure that the concerns that they have would be somehow addressed in whatever capacity I am in. When you also compare being a reporter and a diplomat, there's really very little difference, because as journalists, you would just be reporting, right?
Yeah.
It's like covering an event and then filing a report and sending it to the home office in Manila. But like when I was in the newspapers, the audience is quite smaller. So, your report may only be read by 1, 2, 3 persons compared to hundreds who be able to do that. But for reports, somehow, are much more significant. They could really alter or change the direction of our policies towards a certain country or our people.
And that's
something I enjoy. So it's something I enjoy doing.
And that's a wonderful thing to hear from, because like you said, there's a lot of similarities in being a diplomat and a reporter, because you have to have a lot of character, a lot of integrity, and a lot of passion, because what you want to do is uncover the truth and help our Kababayans. So it really shows the devotion that you have for either job or either position, because it really shows who you are as a person. I really thank you for sharing that. It was really a great piece of yourself to share with all of our viewers. A quick reminder, I do want to remind all the viewers that are watching, if you are watching live, please hashtag live. And if you're watching on the replay, please hashtag replay. But of course, if you appreciate the work of Consul General Gato and his dedication, I invite you to hashtag proud to show him some love and thank him for all of his public service. So Kanjan, I also noticed that you've served as a secretary for the United Nations in New York back in 2006 through 2010. Could you give our viewers a bit more information how your role has evolved within the DFA?
Well, I entered the DFA as a Foreign Service Officer Class 4. So for you to be able to join the Foreign Service as an officer, you have to pass the Foreign Service Officers Examination. So it's considered to be one of the more difficult examinations in the civil service of the Philippines. So I passed the examinations and I accepted my appointment a year after it was given to me. Because as I've said earlier, I was in Indonesia during that time. So when you enter, you'll be FSO 4, or the equivalent of third secretary and vice consul. So for my first foreign assignment, it was at the Philippine mission to the United Nations here in New York. And I was third secretary and vice consul when I came in.
Mm-hmm.
Initially, I was a member of the Philippine delegation to the United Nations Security Council. I was an alternate representative to the Security Council, handling several issues. We only become a member of the Security Council, which, as most people would know, is the most powerful organ of the world body. And it's only every 25 or so years that the Philippines tries to get a seat as one of the non-permanent members. So it was an exciting job. You get to see world leaders there. You get to see how the countries of the world would interact with one another on various issues, humankind.
Yeah.
But I think the best task that was given to me was when I handled the fourth committee, which is known as the Special Decolonization and Political Committee of the General Assembly. And I handled peacekeeping there. So during my term from 2004 till I returned to Manila in 2010, I was overseeing our participation in United Nations peace operations.
Wow.
So I made sure that during my tenure, the Philippines would be able to participate in as many peace operations worldwide as possible. So in addition to the peacekeeping operations where we have deployed military officers and enlisted men and police officers, we would be able to add some more. So I think during my time, we were present in almost 12 peace operations of the United Nations. So we opened Afghanistan, Georgia, the Golan Heights. And before that, we had peacekeepers in Liberia, in Sierra Leone. We even had some in Haiti and in various other countries that required the presence of United Nations peacekeepers. I think that was my greatest accomplishment when I was serving in our mission here in New York.
Wow, that's amazing. I mean, again, like being part of, like what you said, a lot of foreign world leaders and seeing their interactions, how they communicate and how they found peace in different formats is just an amazing story to see. You know, for me, I'm a travel advisor, and one of the things that I do is to connect people to different cultures so that they can understand different perspectives. But on a diplomatic side, that must be very, very intriguing just to be around these world leaders all the time. But, you know, like you mentioned, you were in different places all the time, from Manila to Washington, D.C. to Libya to New York. But I really want to touch on Libya and how each of those assignments played a part in your development and prepared you for your appointment here as a Consulate General in New York. How did all those influence, or how did that give you perspective on how you were going to handle your new position?
Before I went to Libya, I was in Baghdad for 3 years.
Yeah.
Okay. And before I went to Baghdad, I was in Washington, D.C. So the embassy in Baghdad was kept open despite the conflict there. As you know, from 2014 to onwards, the Islamic State suddenly made its presence felt and captured a number of Iraqi cities. And this placed our Kababayan there in grave danger. And it was unfortunate that our ambassador there had to resign, and that left a vacancy in the position of head of post. So, my background as an activist and as a journalist somehow prepared me for that kind of environment. When I was a journalist, and even as an activist, I would cover demonstrations. I would be going to the front lines, and I would go to the mountains to interview and cover activities there. So I was convinced I could handle the situation there, that I was the right guy to be sent. So I volunteered to go.
Uh-huh.
And sure enough, when I came there, ISIS was just several miles from the capital, Baghdad. And it's just, they were already trying to capture the next city. It's called Ramadi. So it was both, exciting, and at the same time, there's this feeling of apprehension. But when I arrived in Baghdad, I was surprised that, unlike when I first came there in 2011, where I really saw a heavily militarized city. No, there were security forces still there, but I was not able to see as many tanks or armored vehicles as I saw when I first came there 4 years earlier for an inspection. So I had my body armor, I had a pistol, to be sure, because, ISIS elements could attempt to kidnap you and then put you in front of a camera and or jumpsuit and, publicly execute you. So we somehow had to have protection. But in my first 5 days, I was really, surprised that, there was nothing. I could not feel anything. We knew that the ISIS carry out as many as 6-7 terrorist bombings per day.
Mm-hmm.
So, they would detonate IEDs anywhere. But we could not hear the explosions. So on my 5th night, I left my body armor in the embassy and the pistol, saying, Baghdad is not the kind of place we all have been reading about, right?
Yeah.
So I was billeted in the most secured hotel in the capital. And that's just about 5 minutes from the embassy. So shortly before midnight, there was this loud explosion. And I felt it inside my room, the 8th floor of the hotel. And as it turned out, I would find out later that ISIS sent a suicide car bomber to hit the hotel.
Mm-hmm.
So the detonation killed 6 to 8 individuals downstairs and wounded several others. And I only saw the extent of the devastation when I went down the next morning. It was really so bad.
Wow.
So that's how bad Baghdad was.
Yeah.
So the experience, of course, allowed me to prepare for my next deployment to Libya. I spent 3 years in Iraq, and my interactions with our Kababayan there prepared me for Libya, which was more complicated, more dangerous than Baghdad. But I've served there for 2 years until I was sent here. So in Libya, the problem that we encountered there was the resumption of the civil war. So 5 days after I arrived, civil war broke out again and placed many of our Kababayan in the capital, Tripoli, under grave danger because the fighting was concentrated there. You have forces coming from the east trying to capture the Libyan capital, and that was the first time, I experienced drone warfare. First time we've experienced explosions taking place near you, and we could hear gunfire regularly. So I've been telling people that the number of explosions and gunfire that I've heard in the 3 years that I was in Iraq, I heard in just a few hours in Libya.
Oh, wow.
That was how bad the situation there was at that time. But we were able to survive. We were able to look after our community, and we made it with only 3 casualties. 3 Filipinos who were slightly wounded by artillery explosions. But we were not so lucky with the coronavirus, which also struck Libya.
Yeah.
We had our first case in March last year, but the first Filipino who tested positive was in June 2020. And when I left Libya, we had around 150 Filipinos who tested positive. Most of them recovered, but 6 lost their lives. Most of them were frontliners. Because we have quite a number of Filipino nurses and other hospital workers still working in Libya.
Well, you talk about the different situations that you faced and just the resiliency of your character to be able to overcome these. I like to mention that because you've actually really come during a very delicate time in the US with the ongoing Asian hate and during a pandemic, which has really tested the limits of every person in any organization. And you mentioned what happened in Libya, but entering the consulate in New York, how has this been a transition for you? And how can you remember in a time in your career that could relate to something like this? I mean, you talk about it here, but in America, we do things a lot differently. And so people are more vocal about their opinions. And you, again, being in New York, I know they're very opinionated in New York. So how has that been for you?
Well, when I came in, I was welcomed by that incident where a 65-year-old Kababayan of ours, Bill Terry, was violently assaulted by a former convict who was just released from prison.
Yeah, unfortunate.
I think mother, right? So I was not expecting such kind of welcome because, many were saying that New York would bring me much needed relief and relaxation compared to Libya, where I came from.
Mm-hmm.
But I had no choice. I had to hit the ground running by making our presence felt and assuring our Kababayan that we are, of course, concerned about the surge in cases of Asian hate crimes that have targeted some of our Kababayan. So that really was something that I would have to give priority to. And what we immediately did was to activate our hotline to convince our people that we have to work together to address this issue. And it's really a major problem. And in fact, the recent statistics that were released show that Filipinos are now the number 3 among Asian ethnic groups that have experienced violence and other forms of race-based harassment. Right?
Oh, wow.
We were number 4 a few weeks ago, but now we climbed to number 3 next to the Chinese and Koreans. So,
Mm-hmm.
so this is really something worrying. And we believe that we have not seen the full extent of the problem.
Sure.
What we in the consulate have assessed is that there are more cases, but these cases are unreported.
Yeah.
And we have been asking ourselves why. And of course, one reason would be it's possible that most of the Kababayan who were affected are undocumented,
Mm-hmm.
are afraid that if they step forward to report, they might jeopardize their immigration status, right?
Yeah.
It's unfortunate that some of our Kababayan still have the mistaken notion that if they request the help of the consulate, that we would turn them into authorities for deportation, which is really the case. So another possible reason is that it's in the nature of Filipinos to be dismissive of things like this. Like, that guy just told me to go back to my country. And I was not offended by that, or so there are things like that that's happening. And if I could share the story of how my parents would advise me every time I go visit from the Philippines. They were here in New York for 30 years.
Mm-hmm.
So the first time I came in, they said, when you take the subway, just don't look at the other passengers because, they might somehow get offended while you're just staring at them like that. So my dad would just, play crossword puzzle while on his way tour from work. So I was also told that to assist people who somehow get assaulted, or if somebody slipped, don't go near them, just call 911 or wait for the ambulance to come in, because you might get accused of pushing him or her and you might get into trouble. So these are the reasons that we think why our Kababayan have not been sharing information like this. So that's why we, in my interactions with various organizations in our areas of jurisdiction, I've been requesting their help and trying to convince Filipinos who have been victims or know of other Kababayan who have been victimized to share the information with us so we could assess and see the impact of Asian hate crimes on our community. And I was with my doctor last Friday, and he just told me, I had a patient, a 70-year-old Filipina who was assaulted while she was entering her apartment building. So somebody just went in and started beating her up, and she ended up in the hospital. That incident happened in February, but was not reported to us.
Yeah.
So you can just imagine how many more incidents like that have been taking place, but we don't know. So that's why I've been explaining to our Kababayan, the reason why we want the data is for us to be able to show you, where these incidents are happening, what time. Can we tell you once we gathered all the information that, most of the hate crimes or incidents take place in the subway, like this particular train line, this particular hour, or out of 100 incidents, 50 took place in Manhattan or in Queens. So they could be properly guided. So we could tell them, please avoid the subway at this time, just take the bus or do something else just to be able to go to work and back. We're working with other community organizations to try to come up with bystander intervention training. Some Filipino community organizations have started offering self-defense training, which is also good. So in the end, we all have to work together to address this concern. We, not just as Filipino community members, but also as members of the wider Asian American Pacific Islander community. We all have to work together to influence authorities to compel them to take the necessary action to address our concerns.
I think you're exactly right. I mean, being a PhilAm here in the United States, even though I was second generation, I was taught to be very passive and, just to let things by so that I can succeed in a different way. But that's not the case now. We really have to empower our Kababayans or any other Asian race so that we have voices. And that's why these platforms, and you can see a rise in the PhilAms who are participating or contributing to giving us. We need more voice in the media so that our issues aren't overlooked. We need to bond together in different industries so we can have representation, not only in, the main industries that typical Filipinos are, but in any industry, because it's important to show how powerful we are as a community. And I think what you're doing now and all the consulates, the embassy, to giving us platforms so that we can speak about it and let other Filipinos know that you're not alone is a very, very important tool, because as a community, the more together that we are, the more that our voice will resound throughout, because we have a larger history than what's told. And it's important that every Filipino knows that we are not just a snippet of American history. We are part of it, and we are part of the fabric. And I think you've hit it right on the spot, Kanjen. I really want to, we can talk about this.
Let me add something there. There's this mistaken notion that from some of our Kababayan that we are being targeted by a certain race group, right? Because most of the cases that have been reported involve individuals from one particular race group. It doesn't mean that, this particular race group targeted Filipinos or Asian, but what's been happening, are isolated cases of Filipinos being mistaken for nationals of country where the virus originated because of our oriental features, right? So it's mostly a case of mistaken identity. And these are carried out by individuals with mental health issues or emotional issues. So most likely they've been displaced by the pandemic. They might have lost their jobs. And, they are having difficulties making ends meet, and somehow they need to release that rage within. So somehow we ended up like, but as I've said, this cases of violence inflicted on Filipinos are perpetrated by individuals with serious mental health or emotional issues. It's not the particular race group targeting Filipinos or Asians, just for the heck of it. So yeah, I'd like to clarify that. And I also share your views about, there's more to share about us.
Yes, exactly.
This morning I had breakfast with our military advisor at the permanent mission upstairs, who's returning to the Philippines. So we've been discussing how, we need to share the Filipino story.
Yeah.
Right? We were talking about Bataan, for instance. How many Americans still remember Bataan at the war? You mentioned that the Philippines hosts the largest American cemetery in the world.
Yeah.
Right? But when you discuss it, the Philippines here, it seems like, there are not many Americans who've heard about the Death March.
Yep.
How we fought together during the Second World War. Or how many Americans would know that, we were a former colony. We were the only colony of the United States.
Yes.
And we fought one another. In fact, the Filipino-American War is the only war that we Filipinos fought for the first time as a people, right?
Yeah.
We were all Filipinos, and when we fought that's the only war we fought together as one people, right? World War II, we fought together with the Americans, and we fought in Korea also with others, but this is the only war we fought as a people. How many people remember? How many Americans know that?
Not many. I know.
So we have 4 million, as you've said, and we could be a powerful voice as long as we're united.
Exactly.
So that's why here in the consulate, I've been talking to various groups, and I've been telling them that we may have our differences. You could have your own political beliefs. You belong to different political colors. But at the end of the day, we're all Filipinos. So let's focus on how we could all work together toward good. So here in the United States, you have 4 million Filipino Americans who could influence policy towards the Asian American community, and also Washington's policy towards the Philippines. So we should realize that we have such great potentials. We should realize that we could have the power to influence how the United States would respond to the Philippines and to the Filipino people. Like now, for instance, the COVID situation back home.
Yes.
We need the help of the United States in getting vaccines to the Philippines, and we're thankful for the donation that they recently made of vaccines for the Philippines. But we also the Philippine government and the private sector ordered 20 million doses of the Moderna vaccine. So what we're just asking is if we could fast track delivery. I read that the target delivery date is June 21. I'm not really sure about that, but could we possibly make it June 1, right?
Yeah.
That would help a lot.
Of course.
So we're thankful to Kababayan, of course, the United States, who reach out to the White House, to their congressmen and senators, asking for their assistance in fast-tracking delivery of the virus. So we really, really are thankful for that. So this is one of the initiatives where, regardless of our political persuasions, we work together to get those much-needed vaccines home to the Philippines.
I totally agree with you. I participate in a nonprofit organization called Philpro, the Filipino Young Leaders Program, and continuously.
So you took part in that program? I was in Washington with, when Ambassador Cleisha initiated that.
Yeah, I'm part of it. And one of the initiatives that we're asking for is for all the Filipino Americans to reach out to their lawmakers in Congress and write a letter so that we can expedite the distribution of the vaccines to our countrymen, because it's important to get it out there. And we've been doing this since last month. And so when you mentioned that, that's an initiative that people don't realize that they have the power to do. If Filipinos are all across the nation, and if you write or you call your lawmakers, your representatives, your senators, and have this in ongoing issues, we can make mountains move. We can make it easier because they don't have the resources that we can provide here in the United States. So I'm so glad that you mentioned that, because that's something that we're really, really passionate about.
We still need to work harder at that. In fact, we have elections coming up, and here in New York, we had 3 Filipino Americans campaigning for public office. So we hope that our Kababayan here would know that they also have the power to put fellow Kababayan in public office. So once elected, this Kababayan could also influence policy favorable to the Filipino community, right?
Yes.
But, it's so hard sometimes to convince them to, that there's something in it for them. For us to be able to get our Kababayan elected, we need to convince some of our Kababayan to register so they could vote. So it's still a work in progress. But I hope, we would reach that level where we could really unite and get many more Filipino Americans elected.
Yeah.
I hope we would see this happen in the next elections.
Yeah, we are making great strides because, again, we talked about having them represented in different industries, different facets, especially in the government. I know we have one with Rob Bonta, the Attorney General in California. So I think that's a great progress for us, and it'll inspire other Filipinos, young Philams that are, looking at other professions and just realizing that they can do it too. And that's why we're so glad that our voice is finally being heard, that all of us are uniting together. And I believe this is going to be a very impactful year for Filipino Americans to reach back to their community. I just want to touch on, we talk about the influences that Filipinos can have on the American government in providing our voice. But we are celebrating the 75th year celebration of the Filipino and U.S. Alliance. Can you talk more about that and the initiative that will be going on for this future year coming on?
The embassy has lined up several activities to commemorate the 75th year of the establishment of diplomatic relations between the Philippines and the United States. And we are also trying to come up with similar activities. And we are hoping that we could use this milestone year as a platform for us to be able to push the Philippine story out there. As we've been discussing, we need to really exert a lot of efforts to remind Americans about the shared sacrifice we've had, the shared history between our two countries. So we hope we could do that with the various activities that we're lining up this year. It's just unfortunate that we couldn't go all out unlike before because of COVID. But we do hope we would have a meaningful celebration of the 75th anniversary of Philippine-U.S. relations this year.
I think it's, it's so important for us to celebrate these partnerships because it just shows how we're able to come together and have different perspectives, but yet find solutions to worldwide problems. So I'm so thankful for us having this alliance. But we're kind of running out of time. I wanted to give you a few minutes to maybe have your final thoughts to share with all of our viewers, Conjen.
Okay, I've been here 6 weeks. I assumed March 30, and I've been meeting with Kababayan almost regularly. So Kababayan from the 10 states under the jurisdiction of the Philippine Consul General here in New York. And we've exchanged ideas, and in my conversations with them, I tried to assure them that the consulate is here for them, right? We are here to serve our people, to look after their well-being, and I assured them that we would work hard to make sure that we get to meet their consular requirements. So as you've known, in the past year, we had to somehow lower the number of Kababayan that we have to serve because of restrictions that came with the pandemic. But slowly, the past few weeks, we've made adjustments so we could serve our Kababayan much faster, more effectively. We increased our capacity. We could now accommodate more Kababayan. We're open 2 Saturdays a month to accommodate frontliners, our elderly, and other Kababayan who urgently need consular services. We are also opening a platform to allow Kababayan with emergency cases to get in touch with us so we could facilitate the application for passports or travel documents to allow them to go home in case there are deaths in the family or medical emergency. So we want to be more responsive, and I think we're on the right track at that point. And we also want to reach out to Kababayan, especially those who are undocumented, and assure them that their consulate is here to look after their welfare as well. As I've said earlier, some of our Kababayan, especially those out of status, still have this mistaken notion that the consulate would turn themselves in if they go to us for assistance. This is a misplaced notion. It's not true that we would do that. We're here to help, and we have resources to help them, either to bring them home or in case they need assistance, in case they get hospitalized, we're here for them. So in closing, I would like to assure our Kababayan that their consulate is here. We're here 24/7. We're available in case they need us. So all they need to do is call, message, email us, and we will respond.
Thank you so much, Conjem. It was such a pleasure to talk to you, and again, give us, the consulate, the embassy, and all Filipinos a voice and a platform that we can all unite together and just discuss about how important it is to voice out our concerns. For right now, I really appreciate you taking the time out of your day. I know you're a busy person. You were mentioning it before, how busy you are, but to take time and really voicing it out it's truly an inspiration. And I hope one day after the pandemic, I can go visit you in New York and we can finally meet in person. So thank you so much, Conjen. I really appreciate all the words and nuggets of information you shared with all of our viewers. And to our viewers and listeners, I really can't thank you enough for spending a few minutes of your day to be here. I just want to leave everyone with an important a quote that I remember by Jack Lew was, "I think there's no higher calling in terms of a career than public service, which is a chance to make a difference in people's lives and improve the world." And that's what Conjen has done throughout all of his endeavors. And I hope and I urge all members who are listening now to do the same to help out your community. With that said, I really appreciate everyone who's listened out. Again, our next show will be next Tuesday at 12 p.m. Pacific time. 3 p.m. East Coast time, and we'll be welcoming Consul General J.V. Chan Gonzaga from Washington, D.C., and we'll touch and discuss a little bit about the current travel restrictions to Philippines and what's going on as travelers are a little bit frustrated and anxiety about traveling to the Philippines. So thank you again for all of our viewers. Thank you, Congen and New York Consulate Office. Until next time, this is Alvin Adriano, CEO of TravelWise. If you need any help with any of your travel plans, please reach out to our office at 301-248-8898 or visit us on the web at www.itravelwise.com. Mabuhay, thank you, and I'll see you guys next week.
Are you ready to travel? We got all the travel buzz here on Smart People Travel Wise with Alvin Adriano on PHLV Radio.
This is your Filipino radio experience in Las Vegas. PHLV Radio. PHLV Radio. Just like a friend from back home.
Hi, this is Gary V. Listen to a Filipino radio experience right here in Las Vegas. PHLV Radio.
PHLV Radio.